Okay, we're going to take a look at ratio, rate, and proportion word problems. We have all the information we need to solve these problems, but now we're going to look at formal writing of answering these types of word problems. So much like an English paper, this is going to be informational writing that we're going to be practicing. All right, so here is our first scenario. Brian ran 4.5 miles in 3/4 of an hour. What was Brian's average speed in miles per hour? So we are going to be finding a unit rate of how many miles in 1 hour as opposed to 3/4 of an hour. So we want to start off by identifying what is known. Okay, so that in the order that we're doing this, we want to identify, we know that in 4.5 miles, that Brian ran 4.5 miles in 3/4 of an hour. Then we want to state what is needed. So what we are looking for, what we want to solve for, is the average speed in miles per hour. Then we want to state any definitions. First of all, we know we have a rate. A rate is defined as comparing two different values in different units. And we are also looking for a unit rate. A unit rate is comparing a value to 1 unit. And then we have to quantify our symbols. And in this case, we're going to use, doesn't have to always be a letter, let's use a question mark. We're going to let a question mark represent the number of miles in 1 hour. And by definition, so another definition, in this case using the information that we have, the rate is 4.5 miles over 3/4 of an hour, because we can write this as a fraction. So what we want to find is the unit rate. So how many miles in 1 hour? Because the unit rate is defined as the value over 1, a unit of 1. So let's go ahead and we've set up our proportion. So 4.5 miles to 3/4 of an hour is equal to some miles over 1 hour. So we're going to, since this is a division problem, we can set it up as 4 times 2 plus 1, that's where the 9/2 comes from, and 3 over 4. So notice that we have a division problem because we've already defined a fraction as division. And how do we divide when we have a fraction? We take the reciprocal. So we're going to multiply 3/4 by the reciprocal, which is 4/3. And what we do to the bottom, we have to do the top. So now we have 9 times 4 and 2 times 3. But we can also see if there's any cancellation that can be done. So that's why we have taken 9 and written it as 3 times 3. And 4 is 2 times 2. And then we have 2 times 3, which are already prime numbers. When we cancel these out, the 3 cancel and the 2 cancels, we're left with 3 times 2, which is 6. So this is, and then we put the labels back in. So this is 6 miles for 1 hour, or 6 miles per hour. So now we finish up with a conclusion. Now that we've shown our math, we finish up with a conclusion. If Brian ran 4.5 miles in 3/4 of an hour, then his average speed was 6 miles per hour, or 6 miles per 1 hour, but we usually drop the 1. So that's what we're going to be looking for as we do a formal writing to answer a problem. So let's try another one. A cookie recipe uses 1.5 cups of flour for every 3/8 cups of sugar. If Andrea makes a large batch or a larger batch of cookies with 1 cup of sugar, how many cups of flour will she need? So again, we're going to start off by what we know. So we're going to identify what is known, and you're going to write this in incomplete sentences. So what is known? is we have 1.5 cups of flour for every 3/8 cup of sugar. Okay, and you can do this, pause the video and see if you can guess what is going to be said before I reveal the answer. So what is known? All right. We also need to know what is needed. So pause the video and identify what do we need. All right. Once you've written that down, let's see if you got it right. So what is needed is how much flour for 1 cup of sugar. All right, once you have that, now we have to state our definition. So what do you think we're going to need in order to solve this problem? What definitions are needed? Okay, here's what we need. We need to know what a ratio is. We're setting up a ratio. A ratio is comparing two values. So we're going to be comparing cups of flour to cups of sugar. We also need the unit rate again. So the unit rate is comparing a value to a unit of 1, since we're looking for 1 cup of sugar. And we need to quantify our symbols, and in this case, and you can pick any symbol, but I decided to let X represent the cup or cups of flour to 1 cup of sugar. All right, so now that we've made those statements, now we set up our proportion. So therefore, 1 1/2 cups of flour is to 3/8 cups of sugar. And we also want to know how many cups of flour is going to be for 1 cup of sugar. So setting up our proportion, we can use the cross multiplication theorem. So here's another method. So 1 1/2 times 1 and 3/8 times x. So using the cross multiplication theorem, I state what I am multiplying. Well, 1 times 1 1/2, we can just say it's 3/2. So turning our mixed number into an improper fraction, and since it's multiplied by 1, that's not going to change. So 3/2 is equal to 3/8 times x, which is 3/8 x. Now, by the definition of multiplication, 3/8 times some number is going to be 3/2. So we need to multiply by the reciprocal. So 3/2 times 8/3. Notice that we flipped this around, because this would end up being a division problem, so we're just going to multiply by the reciprocal. We can write this as a product of prime factors, so 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 over 2 times 3. And you notice that we have one cancellation. So by the cancellation law, what we have left is 2 times 2 over 1, which is 4. So our missing value is 4. So therefore, to our conclusion, we wrap up our conclusion. Therefore, 1 1/2 cups of flour to 3/8 cup of sugar is equivalent to 4 cups of flour to 1 cup of sugar. All right, here's our last one. And this time I'm not going to give you the answers. I will step you through the process, but I want you to try this on your own. There isn't any fractions with this one, so you can try it with an easier type problem. So in Mrs. Kirsch's room, there are 28 chairs to 7 tables. What is the unit rate of chairs to tables? And how many tables are needed if the school has 1,120 chairs? So what do you state first? You state what is known. So you need to write that down. And you don't have to write this formally. You can just write some statements and then we will put it together in class. So right now, state what you know. I'm not going to tell you what that is. Then the second step is to state what is needed. And I'll give you a hint. There's 2 things that we're looking for. If you read the question, there are 2. This is kind of a 2-part answer. So there are 2 things that we're looking for. Then the next thing is to state any definitions needed. And don't forget to quantify any symbols. So I'll let you pick the symbol that you want to use for any missing information and state what do you think? What are we going to be using? Are we going to be using ratios or rates or unit rates or proportions? So state any definition that we need. Then you are going to show the process for solving the problem. And make sure you use any explanation, whether you're using some theorems or not, or whether you're just simplifying. And then last but not least, make sure you do your conclusion. So once you have an answer, you start off by saying therefore, and then restate the problem and include the answer in your problem. All right, so go ahead and rough that out and bring your information into class, and we will put this together as a formal paper. All right, see you in class.